Nels here for LowKick. Today I'm joined by Curtis Calhoun on the latest episode of the weekly Roundup podcast. Great to have you, Curtis. Curtis been helping us for a while on LowKick. He also works, is it fan side of it? I'll say you're a busy man.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots going on, especially this week. We got a lot of fights to talk about for sure.
Yeah, last week we're the best card, but it's always easy enough to get through them not so good cards. It was still decent, but when you've got something like this, up ahead, and we'll jump straight in. Main event: Alexander Volkanovski against Brian Ortega. Tell me about this fight and how you see it going.
Oh man, well this is the first true, in a lot of people's minds, true title defense for Alexander Volkanovski, because a lot of people felt that his two wins over Max Holloway could have gone either way. Obviously, they were razor thin, close decisions. So it's definitely going to be his first real test. And Brian Ortega, I don't really feel like people understand how good he really is. He's one of the best grapplers in the division by far. His boxing has really taken off, especially over his last few fights and his last win over a Korean Zombie. So it's going to be a heck of a main event for sure.
Absolutely. And I think what Brian Ortega brings in, he brings that size. I know Max Holloway's a big 145 fighter, in terms of height, but he's a skinny guy. Ortega's a bulky kid, and I feel like he might have the pop in his shots, although he's not necessarily known for his boxing skills. He might have enough power in there to potentially trouble Volkanovski, keep him at bay, and cause some problems. But for me, I do think Volkanovski's got to be the favourite. He has looked pretty much flawless. I do think he lost the last fight to Holloway, but as you said, it was a close, and he beat him handily the first time for me. So seeing what Holloway did to Ortega, I know MMA math very rarely works, but Volkanovski deserves some credit. He doesn't get a lot of it, and I think getting a win in this one, and especially depending on how he does it, that goes a long way to get him some credit. So I favour him. I think it's a 60-40 fight in his favour, but you can never write off Ortega. He's, as I said, he's big, he's game, he's got a lot of skills, and it's a great main event.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people forget how well-rounded Volkanovski really is. And I mean, no offense to Max Holloway. Obviously, he's one of the best fighters on the planet, but he's not a guy that you have to worry about jiu-jitsu and wrestling and all that. He's a striking main. So Ortega, what he brings to the table is a guy that's more well-rounded and can really bring a lot of challenges in a lot of different ways that Volkanovski hasn't seen since he got the title. Now, obviously, he's faced guys like Jose Aldo, Chad Mendes that have been well-rounded, but it's definitely going to be an interesting test.
Yeah, and Volkanovski spoke to James Lynch for us a few weeks ago, and he wants to get the finish in this one. Obviously, he's been missing that in his past few fights. I'll just have a look. When was his last finish now? I feel like it's been a minute. So let's have a look.
I want to say he finished Aldo, didn't he?
No, decision with Aldo Mendes in
right.
2018. And obviously it's, he's a smaller guy, and it's not necessarily a division known for finishes, and it does take the accumulative effect. But he's saying by the third round, he thinks Brian Ortega is going to be ready to go. And I think Brian Ortega will see out the distance, and I think it's going to be a nip and tuck fight, and I think it's going to be really close. And it's such a great fight. We've had to wait a while for it. My ultimate pick is Volkanovski. Who are you going for?
Yeah, I got Volkanovski too. I have him by a unanimous decision. I think Ortega is really going to surprise some people there in the first couple of rounds, but I think the difference is rounds 3 through 5. I think Volkanovski is really going to work in some leg kicks and try to take the fight to the ground and really grind out a win.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking the same. We'll jump on to the next one. Valentina Shevchenko. She's so dominant at this weight, and it just seems, for me, with all due respect, it seems like another lamb to the slaughter, and a lot of Murphy is the one this time. Do you see any way Valentina Shevchenko can get upset in this fight?
I think the only thing that Lauren Murphy really brings to the table that could be a potential challenge for Shevchenko is the experience. Obviously, she's been in the game a long time. I believe this is her first title shot too, if I remember correctly. But she is a lot more well-rounded. She's a lot like Brian Ortega in a lot of ways too, in terms of bringing that experience and more well-rounded style. But Shevchenko is just so freaking dominant. I mean, she can win the fight pretty much anywhere. Obviously, a lot of people think of her as a striker, but her ground game is really efficient. Her jiu-jitsu is really impressive, and she could win the fight and dominate within the first couple rounds, if I was to guess.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that was scary about her last fight. You know, people thought Andrade might have been, powerful enough to take it to the floor and maybe have some success there. Shevchenko, the striker, says, you know what? I heard all this talk and I'm taking it to heart. I'm just going to take this girl down, crucifix her, and drop elbows on her head, and it was dominant. And for me, if anyone was going to cause trouble in that division, it's Andrade, because she is dangerous. She is a powerful girl, and we've seen what she can do at strawweight. For me, Lauren Murphy is a little bit lucky to be in this situation. Again, I think Joanne Calwood probably should have got that split decision. I thought she did enough, although it was a tight fight. Her streakers also, there was another split decision with Andrea Lee. So, a 5-fight win streak could easily be in 3 wins and 2 losses. So it's not like she's some dominant force that's been tearing through this division and has ripped the title shot off someone. I feel like she's just the next in line, and Shevchenko is going to make a statement in this one. I expect her to go out there, look brilliant, and get the finish probably inside 3 rounds.
Yeah, it's an interesting fight for the division too, because assuming that Shevchenko puts on another dominant performance, who the heck do you put up next? I mean, you mentioned Calderwood, obviously, but I mean, she's really cleaned out the division in a lot of ways. I mean, she beat Andrade, as you mentioned, in her last fight, moving up from strawweight, and it's just the flyweight division is definitely in a weird spot for sure.
Yeah, well, I think we've got on the undercard, and we'll get to it later, obviously, we've got Cynthia Calvillo against Andrade. So if Calvillo comes through that fight and looks good, I think she's next in line. But then again, I don't. Calvillo's coming up from strawweight, and Shevchenko's coming down from bantamweight. I just feel like she's just got too much for these girls at flyweight, and I think as long as she wants to, she could dominate this division. But at the time is going to come where there's nowhere for Nunes to go. If Nunes beats Pena, Valentina beats Lauren Murphy and maybe another contender, it seems like they've got a fight again. So, I expect Shevchenko to look great. And on to the next one. But I'm looking forward to seeing the odds. I haven't looked yet, but I imagine these odds are monumentally in her favor. And anyone betting on Lauren Murphy's going to get some, big dough back if they actually cash it in. It'd be great to see. It'd be amazing to see, but I just don't think it will happen.
Yeah, I agree for sure.
And before that, probably the people's main event. We all love him. Nick Diaz back in action against Robbie Lawler. And before we get into the fight, we'll get into a bit of news that broke last night. Is that this fight will no longer be a welterweight fight. It'll be competed at middleweight. Based off what Dana White had to say at the Tuesday Night Contender Series, it seems to be from the Diaz side of things. Diaz has seemed to have wanted to bump this up to middleweight. And to be fair to both men, they don't really have any title aspirations at welterweight. So what's the point in killing yourself to cut down to 170? What do you think about this being at middleweight? Do you think it'll change anything?
I honestly don't feel like it'll change much, because a lot of people forget that both of those guys have competed at middleweight before. It's not like this is just a last second thing where spur of the moment where they just want to move up and be in a weight class where they haven't been before. Obviously, Diaz in his last fight, 6 years ago, competed against Anderson Silva at middleweight. So, and Robbie Lawler, I believe, is a former middleweight champion in Elite XC. So a long time ago, but it's definitely interesting. I think Dana White put it perfectly last night after Dana White's Contender Series. There's nothing like a Diaz, nothing quite like a Diaz fight week. There's always something going on with Nick and Nate, and it's definitely a fascinating matchup for sure.
Yeah, and we'll get into the matchup itself. Obviously, the first fight was 17 years ago, but I'm not sure what we can take from that now. Obviously, these two guys are way past the prime. But that's why I like to see this matchup, because it's pointless putting Nick Diaz in with a young prospect, and it doesn't do anything for anyone, that type of fight. But these legends fights, they have a lot about them. And For me, it's a toss-up. I've seen the odds. I think it's a toss-up on the odds too. I honestly don't know who to pick. You have a strong lean in this one?
I mean, gut feeling tells me Lawler, just because he's been the more active guy and he's been there. Obviously, it's been a long time since we've seen Diaz, and it's been interesting hearing all these rumors. Obviously, they're just rumors of Diaz having a lot of issues with sparring and all that. Obviously, it's not confirmed. And Cesar Gracie came out today and basically denied anything like that happening. But it's Lawler's the more sure thing. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, we all respect Diaz and we love what he's brought to the sport, but you never know which Diaz you're going to get in the octagon when it comes to fight night. So I think Lawler's the more for sure thing, and I think he's looking to make a statement.
Yeah, and the thing is, looking at Diaz's career, his last win was 2011. It's been a decade since his last win. This would be huge if he got back in there. Right. The reason I'd lean towards him, because I have seen Robbie Lawler lately, and that's the issue I'm having, is that I've seen him and he looks shot. He looks shot shy. He doesn't want to throw them punches, and it's, will he throw them? Will he land enough on Diaz? I feel like Diaz will never be that type of fighter. I feel like he'll come forward and he'll throw as much as he can. I don't think he looked great against Silva, but Silva's a tricky customer to look great against, even in his past his prime days. So I lean toward Diaz, but again, as I said, a decade since a win. He's been living in Vegas for, God knows how many years, partying and living his best life. So all that while Lawler's being champion and he's been, doing the right things. So maybe that'll pay off. But for me, it's a 50-50 fight. If I had to pick, I'm going Diaz, but maybe that's just because I'm a fan.
Yeah, it's definitely the true pick-em, in my opinion, of the main card, at least. Obviously, like we talked about earlier with Volkanovski, Ortega, that's definitely a closer fight, I feel like, than the odds makers and the general fan base are making. But there's just so many unknowns with this fight, I feel like. And it's definitely going to be a fascinating matchup.
Yeah, it'd just be great if they rolled back the years, but I guess we'll see on the night, and 5 rounds of that action. So hopefully, 25 minutes of absolute war. But before that, could be a quick night. We got 2 of the big heavyweights in there, Curtis Blaydes and Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Really good fight. This is 2 of the top guys, the best of the rest. Obviously, we've got the 3 or 4 guys at the top of the heavyweight division, but these 2 are right there, and they just seem to be getting to the level and then dropping. Who do you have in this one?
Oh man, I mean, we were actually just talking about pick'ems, but that's another pick'em too, because it's the typical wrestler versus striker matchup. I think Rozenstruik obviously has more momentum off of that win over Augusto Sakai. Blaydes obviously coming off of that brutal knockout against Eric Lewis, but up until that point, Curtis Blaydes looked pretty dang good. I mean, he was working in his wrestling. His striking has definitely improved over time. I would say that Blaydes probably has way more methods to win and ways to win, I would say. But don't count out Rozenstruik. He's definitely an issue for a lot of guys in that division. Obviously, it's a big fight for the division too, with kind of all that's going on near the top, with whether or not John Jones is going to come back, and Gone happening at a later date. But it's definitely a fascinating matchup.
Yeah, it's, as you said, it is a pick 'em, but I do lean to Blaydes. As you said, he's got a few more weapons in his arsenal. I feel like he could potentially entertain the striking with Rozenstruik for a while before dipping in for the shot. And obviously he did that with Derek Lewis, and he looked great, as you said, until he got caught. Rozenstruik's powerful, probably not as powerful as Lewis, but a bit more technical, and would be able to land more shots. But I think Blaydes will have learned his lesson in terms of sloppy takedown attacks and them type of things. I feel like he's more primed and ready for at some point to make a title run. I think Rozenstruik, although he's at the top of the pile, he's still relatively new to the sport. 12-2 he is. 14 fights into your career, and he's already fought Garner and Francis Ngannou. They're not too bad losses at all. And I think Blaydes is just a step behind them. And I think Rozenstruik might just be a step behind him, but very interesting to see. And before that, we've got, is this the first fight on the card? We mentioned it earlier. Jessica Andrade against Cynthia Calvillo. brilliant fight. It seems like a number one contender fight, but how, if Andrade wins, can you put her in with Shevchenko again? I'm not sure. So this all seems to be on Calvillo winning. Do you think she'll do that?
I feel like Andrade is going to win this matchup. I think despite her last loss to Shevchenko, she's an animal and just a matchup nightmare for any woman in that division. And I just feel like with her striking mixed in with her grappling, she's going to give Calvillo a lot of issues. And I don't feel like Calvillo has really faced that level of competition to this point in time. And I'm really interested to see. I mean, Andrade, I feel like if she wants an immediate rematch with Shevchenko, she's got to get a finish, right?
Yeah, I think she'd have. I think she'd have to. I don't know what she'd have to get a finish, and then Lauren Murphy pull out between her fight and Shevchenko's fight, and then she could slip in. Maybe there'd be a lot on, but I think Calvillo's obviously coming off that loss to Caitlin Chookagian, who I think is the best of the rest in this division. And we see what Andrade did to her. She took her out in one round. So I think there is Shevchenko, Andrade, then everyone else. And that is the flyweight division right now. And I don't know what we do with it, but hopefully someone stands out and makes a performance. You know, Andrade, one punch KOs Calvillo, gets on the mic, says, do you want Shevchenko? Maybe comes up with an excuse for why she lost last time. Shevchenko doesn't look so good against Murphy. They get on social media, start chatting. You never know what could happen. But for me, right now, it seems far-fetched. But it's still a good fight, still a great fight. And as you said, I do favour Andrade. I think she is a cut above girls like Calvillo and the rest of these 125ers.
Absolutely. I think speaking about the flyweight division specifically, I think a name that a lot of people should think about is Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Obviously, it's been a while since she's fought. She lost to Shevchenko for the vacant flyweight title, I believe, a few years back. But that's definitely an interesting matchup because if Jędrzejczyk doesn't want to make that cut down to strawweight again, if for her return, obviously it's been a while since we've seen her, but that could definitely be an interesting matchup as well. Obviously, from a performance standpoint, the first fight between them wasn't very close, but in terms of getting somewhat of some new blood in there, that could be definitely an interesting take.
Yeah, it's just the size, and Joanna is always going to be outgunned against someone like Valentina. And I think they had 3 Muay Thai fights, wasn't it, coming up? Yeah. I think Valentina won them all. So yeah, 5th time lucky, maybe. I'm not sure, but we'll move on. And before that, this, as we said, this card's so stacked. And featured prelim, Marlon Moraes against Merab Dvalishvili. Banger of a fight, and Moraes, not long ago, he was the man. It looked like he was destined for the title. Henry Cejudo, changed all that, and now he's been on a bad run. And Merab definitely isn't on a bad run. He's flying through this division. What do you think of this one?
Oh man, I mean the bantamweight division in general, that's got to be one of the most stacked divisions in the UFC for sure. You can argue it's the most stacked. I really like Merab in this one. I think he brings a lot more to the table, and I feel like he's able to put a pace on Moraes that could really give him issues, because we've seen Moraes when he lost to Cejudo and other guys like that, they've really put a pace on him. I think Merab, with his approach in the cage, can bring that pace and really give Moraes a lot of issues.
Yeah, I think it'll be a different style of defeat if Moraes is going to fall to it, because obviously the last 2 have been big knockout losses against Sandhagen and Fontu. No shame in them because they are 2 devastating strikers. Cejudo is also, one of the legends at them like the weight classes. So no shame in them losses. But this one, you don't see Merab doing that. I don't think he's going to go in and starch him. It's going to be a 3-round, fight if Merab gets it done. And yeah, as you said, he's going to put the pace on him. So I do think this is more favourable for Moraes. I think he'll have more chances, to get his stuff off. Because, on that run up to the title shot, he was sensational. Can he restart that? Is he a bit old now? I think he's in mid-30s. Is his time being and gone? I'm not sure.
Yeah, and this is definitely... Oh, no, go ahead.
I just think I'm edging to Moraes, but I'm pretty sure the odds makers won't agree with me, and I'm pretty sure you probably won't agree with me either. But for some reason, I fancy Moraes in this one.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, you gotta go with Moraes from just based off of his resume. Yeah, it's definitely an important fight for the division too, because I feel like obviously the winner gets right back in the title picture, but I feel like the loser, just because of how stacked the rankings are and just where the division's at, the loser's kind of on the outside looking in and has to probably put up another streak to try to get back in the thick of things. So it's not only about making a statement, but also getting a win to just stay in the conversation when it comes to that bantamweight title picture.
So stacked, and you know, 1 to 15, they're all brilliant, and even beyond that, you know, there's lots of talented fighters outside them rankings too. So, as you said, you know, Mariah Salos here, I think he's done, and Merab, obviously, he's a wrestling heavy guy. They're not necessarily the type of people to try and to push. So a loss for him could be detrimental against someone who is on a bit of a losing streak. I think a lot of people thought he lost that Aldo fight as well. So very interesting fight, yeah. But you're going Marab?
Yeah, I like Marab in this fight, but it'll definitely be a close one for sure. That's a great featured prelim fight for sure. It's definitely a nice prelim card.
Absolutely. And before that, hopefully, you know, visas pending, we get Dan Hooker against Nasrat Haskrat. Great fight, but you know, let's talk about the build-up so far. Dan Hardy, you know, COVID-wise, has been so impacted by it. You know, every time he flies back to New Zealand, he's got a quarantine for 4 weeks. Then he can't even get a visa, so he's going to fly out. I think, does he fly out today or tomorrow? He's going to be flying on Thursday, weigh in on Friday. There's no way we can be getting the best Dan Hooker at the minute. Is it time for him to just uproot and move to the US?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a crazy situation over there for a lot of those guys from the area of the world, and Nasrat Haqparast has definitely dealt with some issues too. I think he tweeted out today that he's planning on getting a short notice visa and flying out tomorrow as well. So both guys are definitely going to be definitely at a disadvantage in that respect. But I definitely like Hooker in this fight. I feel like even with the challenges with the visa and all that, I think Hooker is looking to prove that his knockout loss to Chandler wasn't by definition the fighter that he is today. And I think he's looking to put on a really solid performance.
Yeah, I think this is a nicer fight for him. Obviously, if you're gonna have all that stuff going on, you know, it equals the playing around. Nasrat obviously lost his mum, which is terrible, and he's had all his own visa issues, which seem to be dragging on even longer than Hooker's now. So neither of these guys are coming in 100%. If we're talking about people maybe just not, you know, abandoning the weight cut and doing something at a higher weight, these two have got a brilliant excuse for it. So that's something you might see in the coming days. But I do lean Hooker. We've seen him at his best, and at his best, he gave Dustin Poirier, who for me is the best lightweight in the world, a hell of a fight. And, you know, he had a bad night last time, and I think this is the dropping level he needs. He can get down to Nasrat's level and potentially look good and maybe even get a KO.
Yeah, he needs a confidence boosting win for sure, especially off of that tough loss to Chandler, as we mentioned, and the grinded out win against Poirier, where, I mean, obviously Poirier won, but that fight could have gone either way. I mean, just looking at the stats, I mean, it was such a great fight to watch. And yeah, I definitely like Hooker in this matchup, though, even with everything that's going on behind the scenes. And yeah, I think just the experience too. I think big fight experience is definitely a thing that isn't really talked a lot enough when it comes to these fights, when it's so close on paper in the lightweight division specifically too.
Yeah, and Nasrat's had some troubles when he stepped up. I think that Dober one was a very, we know where Dober is in the division, and we know where Hooker is in the division, and there is a couple levels of stepping levels that he needs to take there. But 26 years old, he's already in this position. This is a huge moment for him. If he beats Dan Hooker, he's cracked it. But if he loses, he'll come again, and his time will come. Never write off someone who's that young and has already achieved that much. But I'd say it's stacked against them for this one.
Yeah, and the talent is there, no doubt about it. But I just feel like the experience of Hooker is definitely going to be the difference.
Yeah, and before that, another heavyweight fight. So we've got Shamil Abdurakhimov, if I'm saying that right. I am terrible with names. And Chris Dorcas, I can pronounce that one. Big fan of Chris Daukaus here, I think he's looked sensational, you know, since he's come into the UFC. Them hands and that type of the type of pace he puts on his opponents is so impressive. And Olenek, who has been a tough out for a lot of people over the years, he dispatched of him really quickly. So 2 performance bonuses on the bounce. Will he get the win on this one, or is this maybe it's a step too far? What do you think?
Yeah, I like Daukaus in this one, especially as you mentioned earlier with his boxing. I think his boxing is going to give him a lot of issues, and I think he's going to control the pace of the fight. And I don't think it'll be a finish, but I think it'll definitely be a grounded out 3-round fight that he'll definitely get the more activity on the scorecards and squeak out a win.
I think this is the fight where you really find out about Daukaus, because obviously, as we said in the last fight, there's levels to this game, and I do think Shamil is just one step above Olenek. You know, Curtis Blaydes beat him, but he's got wins over Tybora, Orlovsky, Chase Sherman, Walt Harris. They're really good wins, and he doesn't go away easy. He might be 40-year-old, but I feel like he's got a lot left to give. But the problem is the last time we seen him was 2 years ago, and I think he might look a shell of himself at this point. So I lean to Daukaus, and the question is after that, who'd you put him in there? Because for me, him against Tom Aspinall is the fight, but does that kill off a prospect, or do we keep them separated or put them together? Because it's fireworks whenever they do book it.
Oh man, I love watching Tom Aspinall. He's definitely he has a lot of potential. I feel like that's probably the fight to make. I mean, just looking at the division itself, if Daukaus is able to really put on a solid performance, not only that, but also get a finish, I think that's probably the matchup to make. And if I'm the UFC, but yeah, as you mentioned, it's definitely one of those bouts where it could definitely be a tough test for Aspinall, especially with what Daukaus is able to bring to the table.
Yeah, he's just got to get through this one, Daukaus, first. You know, potentially a banana skin, but as we said, you know, 40 years old, coming off 2 years layoff. Maybe Shamil's time is gone. I guess we'll see on fight night. And before that, 2 more flyweight contenders in action. I don't think the winner of this has any chance of getting a title shot, but we've got Roxanne Modafferi against Talia Santos. What do you make of this one?
Yeah, I definitely like Modafferi in this one for sure. I think she's looking to prove that ever since she's been on The Ultimate Fighter, she's definitely been somebody to watch and almost kind of the dark horse of that division with everything she's able to bring to the table. It's definitely a fight where you have to watch the first few minutes because it's one of those where you don't really know which Modafferi you're going to see in the octagon. And I feel like she's going to have to really come off to a fast start to really prove a point and try to get back in the thick of things. But yeah, in terms of a prediction, I really like Modafferi in this one by decision for sure.
This is the first one where we're actually going to really disagree because I'm feeling pretty strongly about Talia Santos. I think she is pretty legit. And the one thing I'm worried about is maybe a bit of, what's the word? Well, Modafferi's record since she's been in the UFC has been win one, lose one, win one, lose one. Her last fight, she lost. So it tells you that she's probably going to win this one. But for some reason, I won't be picking her. I think she might go back-to-back defeats here. I like Talia Santos. I think her wins over Molly McCann and Gillian Robinson were really good wins. Two girls I am a fan of, but she didn't give them a sniff. It was dominant. She's big for the weight. And her only loss was it UFC debut, a split decision. So I just don't. I think maybe the UFC jitters might have got the better of her, and we didn't. And now we're seeing the best of it. And I think Modafferi is the perfect step up. I think she's going to pass it with flying colours. I think she's going to look great.
Yeah, I mean, I even though we disagree, I can't hark on you for your opinion there. I mean, Santos is definitely a matchup issue and definitely a future potential title challenger. I mean, she's got it all. She's looked dominant in her last few fights. I just think the experience of Modafferi is really going to be the difference. But like you said earlier, I mean, Santos brings so much to the table. And I think depending on what happens with the top in the flyweight division, she could definitely get a title shot sooner rather than later, especially if she can really continue her streak.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I am not writing off Roxy yet. Like, she's been written off her whole career, I feel like, because she's the nice, happy warrior or whatever she calls herself. She gets written off. She's not the typical fighter, But then she goes in there and she, puts on such brilliant performances. When she upset Macy Barber, it was absolutely brilliant. And so that'll finish the prelims. But then we've got the early prelims before that. 5 fights. We won't go into them all, but I just want you to pick out your favorites for me. Is there any that stand out to you that you're thinking, I can't wait for that one?
Oh man, well I love Nick Maximov against Carl Roberson for sure. This is a big test for Maximov. I believe this is his UFC debut too.
Yeah,
and yeah, and he trains with the Diaz brothers, and they've really been hyping him up and talking about the potential of this guy. And I'll tell you what, Carl Roberson is definitely a tough get for your first fight in the UFC. He's dangerous. He has a lot of experience in the octagon, and his boxing is really impressive too. But yeah, I mean, in terms of a prediction, that's obviously we haven't seen Maximov yet, but it's definitely going to be a pick 'em fight. And I think this is definitely an opportunity for fans to really see a guy Maximov that could definitely be a potential force in the rankings for the future for sure.
Yeah, that's one of them fights. I won't be making a pick, but I'm very interested to see, because we could see a star being born. Someone out the Diaz gym against someone like Robertson, who it's a surprise matchup. I know Robinson's on a couple of losses, but Brendan Allen and Marvin Vettori are two, top tier guys. Vettori's just coming off a title shot. So, and now Robinson's all the way down to a UFC debut soon. So I'm not sure how that works, but it either says they really fancy Nick Maximov or they really want to get Carl Robinson a win. And I guess we'll find out fight night. Again, as I said, I'm not picking anyone in this one, but very excited to see Nick in his debut. And I think it just tells you what type of fight he is already, taking this opponent in his first UFC fight.
Yeah, and I love this matchup too, because it's the typical youth versus experience matchup, especially with Maximov making his debut. And this is definitely an opportunity for Maximov, especially on a big stage, to get the card started with a really impressive performance. And this is definitely a potential coming out party for him.
Yeah, and the last, or the one I want to mention anyway, is Eris Medic against Jalen Turner. I think this is a brilliant fight. The last of the early prelims. I think Medic just looks absolutely sensational, on Contender Series in his debut. No one's got a sniff, but Jalen Turner is a serious fighter. And I think this is a brilliant test. And as I said in the last fight, not really going to give a pick on this one, but it's just one. I'm going to be tuning in early. I'm going to be watching this fight, and I'm really anticipating. I think they're both about 27 years old, about that. So, two up-and-comers straight away, and I really can't wait for it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is just a continuation of how big the Contender Series has become. I mean, you see these prospects right away get these big opportunities on a big stage on these early prelim cards. And yeah, as you mentioned earlier, that's definitely it's a tight matchup, but it's definitely going to be a fight to watch for sure. Definitely a great pick.
Yeah, and that's me done. Do you have anything to add? It's a brilliant card. Can't wait to watch it. And we broke it down here. It's rare we do these, and you've got pretty much every fight we could, go in and break down and chat about, for as long as we wanted. But such a banger of a card.
Absolutely. And I think something that we didn't talk about is this is also International Fight Week too. So I feel like for fans who are traveling to Vegas, definitely would recommend participating in some of those festivities going throughout the week. I think there's a bunch of meet and greets with guys like Dominic Cruz and a bunch of fighters that are coming into town. We got the Hall of Fame ceremony, I believe, tomorrow night. I don't remember exactly where it is, but that's definitely something to tune in and definitely attend if you can. So definitely, if you're in town in Vegas, that's definitely something you want to participate in. It's definitely something as a UFC fan you want to be involved.
I know, you're making me jealous even thinking about it.
Yeah, for sure. It's there's definitely a lot to talk about this week, and I can't wait for this card for sure.
Yeah, well, me neither. And thanks for joining me, Curtis. It's a pleasure to have you, and hopefully we'll have you again soon. UFC 266 coming on Saturday. Can't wait. And thanks guys for watching, and see you again soon. Thanks.
Make sure to subscribe to the LowKick MMA YouTube channel for all the latest news, event previews, and interviews with some of the biggest stars in MMA.